So after that beautiful song and meditation from Cynthia about the divine light, we have this teaching actually across all the religions. And divine light itself is universal. And why is it that we are that light? Because we are made in the image of God. And who is God? God is light, as we read in Scripture. And because God is light, Jesus proclaimed, I am the light of the world. And this is a very, very deep and profound proclamation. And it translates also to each one of us. You are the light of the world, because we are made in the image of God. So we have this very profound affirmation of the deep truth of who we are. And when Jesus says this, he's speaking from the Christ consciousness directly. And basically he's channeling the essence of God into the world, and we are each called to do the same. And then we see this in other traditions as well. So in the Psalms, in the Old Testament, in thy light we see light. And here, thy light refers to that exquisite, uncreated light of God. The light that enables us to see light. That light which cannot be seen, but which enables us to see. Or as the Upanishads put it, that which cannot be heard, but enables us to hear. So this is the very light of divine consciousness itself. And then we see it also in the Bhagavad Gita, in the Hindu tradition, where it speaks of the light of lights. And when Krishna has the revelation of God in chapter 11, and the light is overwhelming in its brightness, in its revelatory power. And it says there that it's as if 1,000 suns rose all at once in the sky. So this light is a stupendous, overwhelming light, the light of God. And then we see it also in Buddhism. Throughout the scriptures in Buddhism, many references to the light, the very state of awakening in Buddhism called enlightenment. And here, the Buddha emanates a great light pervading the entire cosmos. And then we see it also in the shamanistic and indigenous traditions. The light within that can never be extinguished, called the forever light, in this wonderful book by Anita Sanchez called The Four Sacred Gifts. And of course, in the unity tradition, we see the light of God is central. And Myrtle Fillmore said, the light of God revealed to us that life was of God, that we were inseparably one with the source. And she goes on to explain, this thought came to me first. What this revelation did to me at first was not apparent to the senses, but it held my mind above negation, and I began to claim my birthright and to act as though I believed myself to be the child of God, filled with God's life. I gained. Others saw that there was something new in me. They asked me to share it. I did. Others were healed and began to study. My husband continued his business and at first took little interest in what I was doing. But after a time, he became absorbed in the study of truth too. We consecrated ourselves to the Lord and kept doing daily that which we felt led to do. We began to prosper, a little at a time, and our health continued to improve. Life became sweeter and more interesting, and we began to see a new world. So here, the revelation of the light of God transformed Myrtle and Charles, transformed their very beings to where they began to see a new world and began to serve in a new way. And we are each called to this ourselves. So where does it all begin? We have this mystery of God, who is ultimately invisible. Yet God is a simple essence, as Meister Eckhart says. And so we have the essence or energy of God, but in its primordial state, it's completely invisible. And we see this testified to across the scriptures. So, for example, in Genesis, the darkness covered the face of the deep. And in the Theosophical scriptures, the darkness breathes over the slumbering waters. And again, in the Hermetic corpus, there was darkness in the deep and water without form. And finally, in the Rig Veda, from that arose the primal darkness. And from that arose the waters of the oceans. So we have across the traditions these references to the eternal darkness. And so here we are confronted with this darkness, this invisibility of God. As the Islamic hadith said, God proclaimed, "I was a hidden treasure and longed to be known. Hence I created the world, in order to be known." And in the Christian tradition, right at the beginning of the Bible, we find, "Let there be light." And God said, "Let there be light." And God separated the light from the darkness. And so then what happened was we had this primordial darkness of God, and suddenly, let there be light. And we have the light streaming, emanating from the Godhead into the world, into the plane of divinity, and creating essentially the heavenly bodies. So in the Christian tradition, creating the Trinity, God, Christ, and the Holy Spirit. In the Hindu tradition, creating the Hindu Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. In the Islamic tradition, creating Allah and the 99 names. In the Buddhist tradition, creating Sambhogakaya, the light of the Buddha consciousness. So across the traditions, we have this process that out of the infinite, obscured source comes the light, which then creates these heavenly structures of light. So, and we see there on the right-hand side the essence or energy of God. I've symbolized that by the letter E here. And it gets partitioned. It gets revealed and also divided by light itself into these various heavenly bodies. And so, go back. And so we see this symbolized by that E divided by C. C is the symbol in physics for the speed of light or the operation of light. And so we see that the divine energy or essence is divided by light and becomes the heavenly realm. And then the Bible continues. I think we went back to this parting of the waters. Go back one slide. And then God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And so then, this became this. And here we have the essence or the energy of the Godhead, first emanating through divine light to create the heavenly realm, the plane of divinity. And then emanating again, divided by light again, if you will, partitioned by light, to create all the miraculous objects throughout the created universe, the material realm, the manifest realm. And so we see here this flow from the E on the right-hand side, the essence of God, the energy of God, becoming divided by light, E over C, the divinity, the plane of divinity, and then divided again by light, becoming the manifest universe, the material universe, represented there by M M for matter. And so what we see here is that matter is this divine energy divided by light twice. And so we can write this as a simple equation. And don't worry, we're not going to get all too mathematical on you here, but this is a way of understanding this. And if we rewrite that equation, we arrive at Einstein's famous equation, E equals mc squared, which is the central equation of relativity theory. And in this way, we can see that in some sense, this equation represents the descent of manifestation from the divine plane into the material universe. Now, of course, an orthodox physicist would object immediately, saying that I'm extrapolating wildly, that this formula applies only in the physical realm, and I myself would have been one of those objecting physicists 30 years ago, because energy refers to a very particular quantity measured by joules in physics, and m refers very specifically to mass measured in kilograms, and c is the speed of light, and this formula means nothing more. But as Einstein himself said, imagination is more important than knowledge. And so what we've done here is what he would call a spiritual Gedanken experiment, if you will, a visionary thought experiment, in which we are exploring the deeper meaning of this principle. And we see, as we have just seen, that it can be understood as the descent of the divine essence, divided by light to create the heavenly realm, and divided yet again by light to create matter. And so we have this simple formula. Heaven is God divided by light. And matter is heaven divided again by light. And so we see that this famous formula from Einstein has both its literal physics meaning on the material plane, but it also has this symbolic meaning of the planes of manifestation and the nature of the relationship between the different levels of manifestation. So now, how does all this work in practice? We heard from Myrtle Fillmore how she had this revelation of God as light and how it transformed her being and transformed her service and her and Charles's service to the world. This process is described beautifully by Rumi, who, as you know, always captures the essence of things. And Rumi has this beautiful quatrain. Now, that's perfect. Perfect for what I want to speak. Perfect image. Where Rumi says, I relinquished my name, my fame, and my mind. The sun appeared, and all my shadows ran. I ran after them, but vanished as I ran. The light followed and hunted me down. And in those 4 lines, it really captures the entire transformative journey through the process of divine light. So the first part is, I relinquished my name, my fame, my mind. As the song was singing, as we heard in the song just a few minutes ago, I am not the stories I was told by my teachers, by my parents. I am not all of those broken parts within myself. They're there. We don't deny them. Nor am I all of the personality structures I've built up and the identifications I've built up in the world. I am this professor, I am this father, I am this, that. Those are not false, but they're not the ultimate truth of who we are. And they have to be relinquished as our primary identification. But we don't relinquish them easily. So what happens, as Rumi says, is the sun appeared, the divine light appeared, and all my shadows ran. All of my identifications, all of my places where I'm trying to obscure myself from the light. And I run to cover them and to protect them. But as I do so, what happens? I vanished as I ran. My very being and sense of I begins to disappear, begins to dissolve the boundary between this I and that light. And so I vanished as I ran. The light followed and hunted me down. So the divine light itself kept the pursuit up. And eventually what happens is that boundary between me and the light is dissolved. And I become that light. I become the living ambassador of divine light here on the earth. And this is really the call for each of us, is that we go through this transformative journey. And we experience those stages of resistance when we run after our shadows and try to cover them. But this light is an all-seeing light. It has no shadow. It sees from within and without. So everything is nakedly revealed before it. And so the attempt to cover and to chase the shadows is futile. And the light follows us until we open to the light and allow it to take up residence in our own being. And then we become an ambassador of that light and a source of that light in and for the world. So just take a short moment of prayer. And remembering Jesus' proclamation, I am the light of the world, and what he came to teach and what he told us in the Sermon on the Mount is that you are the light of the world. May that divine light infuse each of us in the depths of our hearts so that we may indeed become and fully live into being the light of the world. God bless.